very good evening and welcome to the 8 o'clock news bulletin. We are coming to you live from Hospital Hill in Babane. I'm Lungelele Makakula. First, let's take a look at tonight's headlines. Maidens from the Lubombo region have received meat packs from their majesties. The Deputy Prime Minister says government has played a remarkable role in the reduction of disasters countrywide. The 2020-2021 season will kick off from the 20th of November 2020. The news. Maidens from the Lubombo region have received meat packs from their majesties. The maidens have vowed to keep themselves pure in response to efforts by their majesties to secure a bright future for every maiden in the country.
On Sunday, the world commemorated the International Day of the Girl Child, which highlights the challenges faced by the girl child around the world. The distribution of the meat packs to thousands of young girls in the kingdom is a striking reflection of the decisive steps which their majesties have taken to safeguard the future of young girls in Eswatini. The future of the girl child is under threat as she is increasingly confronted by challenges which may include HIV, teenage pregnancy, drug abuse, and a litany of other challenges. To ensure that Imbali Regiment is safe, their majesties continue to make the reed dance a shield which they use to protect the regiment from deadly challenges. As the maidens were receiving the meat packs in the Lubombo region, they vowed to keep their chastity so that the country may not suffer from an acute shortage of women of integrity in the future.
Siyathembisa Nkosi ukuthi sitatiphatha kahle kuze sibe ngumlibaloya embili. Siyathembisa futhi ukuthi ke sitigcina singemamfombatane kuze singeke simithi.
Siyathembisa Nkosi ukuthi sitaqhubeka sitiphathe kahle siyimbali yeMaswati. Sifisile futhi kuthi nakulomnyaka lotako nisikhanziselo siyimbali yeMaswati. Siyathembisa vele kakhulu ukuthi sitativikela nakuletifeni temagcansi bo HIV.
Indvuna yembali Nonduduzo Zubuko is impressed by the progress made so far since their majesties commissioned the distribution.
Umsebenzi uhamba kahle kakhulu lesithokotela konje kakhulu ukuthi nasifika lemphakathini siyakhanza lembali iphume ngetingane iyakhomba nayo ukuthi iyawuthakasela lo msebenzi wenkosi nekuyikhutsata ke siyikhutsata nasahamba kulemphakathi ukuthi ayitiphathe njani ilandzele nemithetho betempilo lokungona phela lokusikhungathile lesikhathi sanamuhla silivela kangwane singumhlaba wonke ukuthi sikhungethwe iCovid ngaba ngiloko nje ukuthi yathokota ke kakhulu ukuthi nasifika le uyabona lokuthi balelivangeli selishumayele bayalalela futhi bayaligcina sekuba ngilabo ke ngoba asifani emakhaya akafani labanye bamphofu khanze ukuthi ke bona abakhoni kuba nabo lawo mawetifonyo kodwa ke sibambisene nebaka disaster siyazama ukuthi sibanike leto tifonyo nasifika khona sibakhanza leyo mbali.
On the news, I am Sandile Makanya reporting with Themba Mamba in the Lubombo region.
The Deputy Prime Minister Themba Masuku says the government of Eswatini has played a remarkable role in the reduction of disasters countrywide. The Deputy Prime Minister said this during the commemoration of the International Day for Disaster Reduction, which was held at the Hilton Garden Inn Hotel in Babane.
The International Disaster Reduction Day is celebrated annually on the 13th of October. This year's theme is Good Disaster Risk Governance. Speaking during the commemoration of Disaster Reduction Day, Deputy Prime Minister Themba Masuku says the measurement of governance outputs and outcomes will require an in-depth understanding of intra-governmental and inter-organizational operations, development partners and private sector networks.
The pandemic came at a time when the country was in advanced stages in the development of policies, laws, institutions and strategies for managing multiple hazard-induced disasters, and there is also a need to translate the instruments into proper practice.
UNDP Deputy Representative Shaima Hussein says in order to strengthen disaster risk governance at national level, are expected to mainstream and integrate disaster risk reduction within and across all sectors.
It speaks about understanding disaster risk, which apparently not all of us have the same understanding, strengthening disaster risk governance to manage disaster risk, investing in disaster risk reduction for resilience, and enhancing preparedness for effective response and to build back better in recovery, rehabilitation, and reconstruction.
National Disaster Management Agency's Chief Executive Officer Russell Dlamini says if government and civil society can work together, the disaster risk may be minimized.
Kuhola ke nokwehliswa kwedehlakalo kufaka ekhathi kwekuthi kunemthetho lengiwo kunema structures noma ama arrangements langiwo umthetho ke kuyatiwa la ngone ngale COVID-19 ne climate change lese iphaphamisa umhlaba wonke ukuthi i disaster risk governance is extremely important. Bumqoka ke kule disaster risk governance buvele kakhulu nyalo lokune COVID. Hayi la kangwane kuphela emhlabeni wonke.
Dlamini further stated that this year's theme resonates with the COVID-19 emergency response operations. Reporting, I'm Sotwa Dlamini with Fortune Dlangamandla in Babane.
The Minister of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation, Tulidladla, says as commercial airlines have resumed, government will no longer repatriate Eswatini like it has been doing since the outbreak of the COVID-19.
In the past months, many people from Eswatini who were stranded in other countries due to lockdowns and other travel restrictions imposed as a result of the COVID-19 outbreak were not able to return to the country. It was then that His Majesty's government, in collaboration, started the repatriation process, which resulted at least 4 airplanes jetting into Eswatini to bring back home those who were stranded abroad. However, the Minister of Foreign Affairs has since stopped the special repatriation process. The Minister of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation, Tulidladla, advises the Maswati who want to return in the country to get COVID-19 certificates, which takes less than 72 hours to obtain and return in the country using the usual way. The Minister says commercial flights have opened. The Maswati should therefore take flight to South Africa as per the norm. The Minister also encourages tourists to also follow such routines so that the country's economy could boom.
In
the country, airplanes resumed operations on Monday, October 12. Eswatini Airlink says during the last 6 months when international travel was prohibited, the company made a loss of 10 million emalangeni. For Eswatini TV News, Fortune Dlangamandla, Mbabane.
The House of Assembly has adopted a rural electrification report by the Ministry of Finance Portfolio Committee, which says electricity group schemes will no longer contribute 10% of the amounts the project is expected to cost. The fund amounts to 49 million emalangeni.
Report of the Ministry of Finance Portfolio Committee on Rural Electrification Fund Regulations 2020 state that it will now take only 4 weeks for constituencies and chiefdoms to approve or reject requests for funding from community electricity group schemes. Meanwhile, companies to fund the schemes are expected to approve or decline requests within 3 months. The committee's chairperson, MP Maui Kumalo, when tabling the report, asked for the House to adopt it so people in Eswatini who want electricity connection to speedily receive assistance.
Lesikhwama kusukela 2017 imali lobe solingena bengena ukhanze ukuthi Mr Speaker ndawusini nje ngawusi ku tariff emalinye tariff 1.29 cents kusho kuthini in percentage terms kusho ukuthi 0.74% wale tariff lobanjwako bafenisha labo bakhona bavele bakhuluma ngembaba baqela kokuthi lesikhwama asisebenze Mr Speaker sibuke tonke letinkundla baze baqela ukuthi lama regional aid parliamentary bodies Shiselweni, Lubombo, Manzini, Hoho, abahlali babuka. Lenzaba elesikhwama ukuthi kunetiswana yini.
Members of Parliament also debated the report before adopting it. Most of the MPs were pleased with the details of the report.
Injani capacity yakhona injani emadonors lapha Mr Speaker asangakhandwa ukuthi asayabaleka currently nje sesirenew ama-quotation angathi kangaki solo sirenew aphelelwa sikhathi so the turnaround time yangalabo ukuthi sitaba nalo line nokuthi ibe khona ukuthi within so much time so that Mr. Speaker,
a report by Eswatini Electricity Company shows that rural electrification efforts by the company and government of Eswatini have achieved 80% electricity coverage in Eswatini. For Eswatini TV News, Fortune Dlangamandla, Parliament.
World Food Programme head of the Eswatini office, Sisi Bianca, says the organization's Nobel Peace Prize of 2020 award will help place a spotlight on the 690 million globally people who go to bed hungry every night. Bianca also reaffirms the organization's commitment to bringing food relief to Eswatini's vulnerable and support to smallholder farmers.
The Nobel Peace Prize is one of planet Earth's most prestigious awards given to individuals and organizations that have played a sterling role in impacting humanity in a remarkable and positive way in any particular year. This year, this award was given to the United Nations World Food Programme in recognition of the organization's hunger combat efforts and provision of food supplies, even amid the raging COVID-19 pandemic, to the world's vulnerable communities. WFP's head of office in Eswatini, Sisi Bianca, says this award will help increase awareness on issues of hunger globally. She gives a perspective of the organization's programs that have touched the lives of the people in Eswatini in 2020.
We supported about 44,000 people who could not have their next meal. In addition to that, we also provided meals, hot meals to orphan and vulnerable children, 55,000 orphan and vulnerable children in neighborhood care points in the whole country, in all 4 regions of the country. In order to also link these life-saving activities to long-term food security, sustainable solutions, the World Food Programme has been supporting smallholder farmers. We have supported 700 farmers in the country, of which 62% are women.
The organization has further rolled out a 28 million Emalangeni cash assistance program that will benefit vulnerable families in the next months.
Between May and September 2020, we're providing cash transfers to select regions, select areas or constituencies in Manzini and Hoho regions that have been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic.
WFP's head of Eswatini office also applauds the thousands of the organization's workers who brave tough situations like conflict zones to bring food relief to those in need. For Eswatini TV News, Hlengwen Love with Linton Kule in Babane.
Inmates at His Majesty's Correctional Services will now be eligible to be granted a one-day parole on conditions, be monitored and supervised through the use of electronic gadgets. This is contained in the finalized draft of the Correctional Services Regulations of 2020, which was validated on Tuesday by the HMCA's executive. In terms of the powers conferred under the Correctional Services Act of 2017, the Correctional Services drew up a draft of the regulations of 2020 with new developments. The developments comprises of the establishment of the Local Review Committee, which will analyze, compile and recommend to the parole board eligible candidates for the one-day parole, compulsory education and formal education, the release of an offender on medical grounds, and the granting of a remission sentence. The committee that drafted these regulations met with the executive for purposes of deliberating and fine-tuning the draft before it is presented to stakeholders. The chairperson, Musa Wenkosi Shongwe, says they did due diligence on the gathering of information when drafting the regulations.
Frameworks were derived from legislations from countries such as Botswana, Republic of South Africa, Kenya, and Namibia. The prisons regulation of 1965 have served as a primary source. Time and again, brainstorming sessions were held to scrutinize content layout for a tailored presentation.
HMCA's Commissioner General Pindile Dlamini says they encounter challenges at the HMCAs because there are no regulations that govern them.
The department has experienced a lot of challenges in the application and implementation of the Act due to the lack of regulations to operationalize it. As a result of the challenges, a committee was appointed to draft the necessary regulations.
This is the first validation meeting of many to be held in the coming weeks. Reporting, I'm Lungelele Makakula with Mbongatube, Zulwini. The Royal Eswatini National Airways Corporation has announced that it has already developed a strategic business plan which will help create more direct flights destinations to and from Eswatini. This is an update given by Renok's Marketing and Communications Officer, Batabile Ngambule.
With the post-COVID-19 economic recovery plan having clearly outlined Eswatini's development targets in different sectors of the economy during these times of the outbreak of coronavirus, and with the strategy specifically referring to the opening of new direct flight destinations to and from Eswatini, in addition to OR Tambo International Airport in Johannesburg, South Africa, which is currently the only direct flight destination for local flights, the country's leading aviation services provider, the Royal Eswatini National Airways Corporation, RENAC, has since developed a strategic business plan which will help unlock key partnerships and strategies required to open up more direct flight destinations for Eswatini.
We have already developed a strategic business plan which is currently being processed by the board, after which the shareholder will then review it, and after approval, implementations will begin.
But Tabile says apart from the strategic business plan, RENAC has also cemented bilateral air service agreements with different countries, which will help ease the launch of flights.
Bilateral air service agreements have been established with a couple of countries, and those will make it easy when we launch our airline. And then worth mentioning is that we are at almost the final stages of our air operators certificate process, acquiring it from the regulator, ISWACA. So that will enable us to begin commence operations. Current agreement with the local operator between Eswatini and Johannesburg does not support the introduction of new routes and flights, does not support the development of the airline industry. Our legal team is currently reviewing the terms and conditions for that agreement to ensure that it promotes the introduction of new routes.
RENAC, as one of the key players in the kingdom's aviation industry, has expressed commitment to boosting the kingdom's aviation sector. For Eswatini TV News, Hlengiwe Ndlovu with Muzimkonda at Matapa.
Due to the outbreak of the coronavirus, the Mbabane Municipal Council will not be convening community meetings to gather the public's views on the 2021-2022 budget. Therefore, residents are urged to submit their views using the council's online platforms. Community meetings to get public views on the next financial year will not take place this year due to the COVID-19 regulations. Normally, Municipal Council visits all communities to get their submissions on council's budget. This year, this exercise will be done differently. Public Relations Officer Lakita Bete says Council has in place various communication platforms that the public can use to submit their views.
So we've come up with initiatives through which we hope members of the public will get on board and submit their budget views. So the first platform they can actually use is to use our WhatsApp line on 7603-6347. They can submit their views through that WhatsApp line, or they can alternatively call 2409-7022, or they can also submit their views through our email address. We would like to give confidence to members of the public and also to assure them that we will treat the submissions with the seriousness that it requires. So we will consider their submissions and they will be factored into our budget.
He says the deadline for submissions is the 19th of October. Reporting, I'm Lungwelele Makakola with Fortune Dlangamandla in Babane. The 2020-2021 football season will resume on the 20th of November 2020. This is according to the Eswatini Football Association CEO Frederick Mgomezulu. A report next.
After the government gave the green light for football to return, the Eswatini Football Association called an urgent meeting where they were to discuss ways on how football will return. After the meeting, the Football Association called a press briefing where the Chief Executive Officer Frederick Mgomezulu announced the resolution taken.
Also to a major highlight when it comes to the issue of registration and the kickoff of the Premier League competitions is now scheduled for the 20th of November 2020. Also aligned to that is that teams are expected to reunite next week, that is on the 19th. However, the first implementation would be the health aspects, which is COVID-19 tests, screening, and all the necessary elements that will be prescribed by the health practitioners to get our teams ready to participate.
Mgomezulu says the first division will start on the 28th of November because there are teams that will have to play playoffs first. Other resolutions taken include that the transfer window period will start from the 26th of October 2020 to January 2021. And everyone who will be involved in football will have to take a COVID test first. Sihlang Samnikati will return to training this week as they are expected to play Congo in the AFCON qualifiers. And Sitsewe Samhlekas will also be preparing for the Women's COSAFA Cup. Both competitions will be played in November. The association says they have a budget to help the teams with everything needed for them to return to action. The games will return with no fans expected to attend any games, and stadiums that will be used are still being inspected, and they will be announced soon. Mgomezulu concluded by saying that all the tournaments scheduled for the upcoming season will go ahead, but they will still looking at the best possible way in which they can be played. Reporting for Eswatini TV Sports News, I am Patizom Sivi. Babane.
Swimming Association President Herman Jele says they will be hosting their first swimming gala in November. This comes after government allowed swimming to resume their activities. Jele was speaking in an interview with the Eswatini TV sports journalist in Manzini.
The Eswatini government continues with easing lockdown restrictions and allowing selected sporting courts to return to action. The Swimming Association is among the latest sporting courts to be allowed to return. The association is delighted with the news since they announced their wish to engage the government to allow them to compete again during the annual general meeting. The association president, Herman Jele, says they will have their first swimming gala in November.
As an association, in order to see and to give the swimmers the opportunity to assess where they are, we are scheduling a gala for the month of November, which will just about give our clubs a month or so to prepare. This is very important for us to assess as an association and as a sporting code to see where we are, where our swimmers are skill-wise after this break in preparation and assessment for international events. So certainly November will be where we want to host the first gala.
Jele says they're giving this time to their swimmers to prepare for the gala and encourage them to train harder. Reporting for Eswatini TV Sports News, I am Patizom Sivi, Manzini.
We've come to the end of our news bulletin, but before we leave you, let's take a recap of tonight's headlines. Maidens from the Lubombo region have received meat packs from their majesties. The Deputy Prime Minister says government has played a remarkable role in the reduction of disasters countrywide. The 2020-2021 season will kick off from the 20th of November 2020. And now we shall take a look at an update from the Ministry of Health on the COVID-19. The country has recorded one COVID-19 related death today, which brings the number of COVID-19 fatalities to 114. Only 13 people were tested positive for COVID-19. Thank you very much for watching the 8 o'clock news bulletin. The weather will follow. Have a good night.